Armand had never imagined that one simple decision, joining a cultural exchange visit to a faraway mountain kingdom, would change the course of his life. He had always been the kind of person who volunteered whenever someone needed help. Back home, he joined rescue drives, helped during floods, and often signed up for medical camps. His friends joked that he had a habit of walking straight into situations others ran away from. He always laughed and said he just wanted to be useful. But even he didn't know that this trip would test him in a way he had never experienced before. The kingdom he visited was known for its beautiful mountains, calm valleys, and a royal family respected by everyone. It was the kind of place that looked peaceful from the outside, but held many old traditions within. Armand was excited to learn about their history and culture. His group included students, teachers, and volunteers like him. Their schedule was full, visiting museums, meeting local families, and hiking across the mountain paths. Everything felt fresh and exciting. On the fourth day of the trip, the group planned to explore a restricted valley area that had become safe only recently after weeks of minor tremors. The officials assured them the route was fine now. Armand, being naturally curious, was one of the first to agree. The air that morning was cool and clean. Birds sang somewhere far above, and sunlight filtered through the tall cliffs. Everyone moved in a single line as their guide kept giving instructions. But halfway through the valley, something felt strange. Armand sensed a quiet vibration beneath his feet. It was faint, barely enough to notice, but he felt it. He paused and looked around. The valley walls looked normal, the path stable. The others were chatting, taking pictures, enjoying the scenery. He tried to relax, assuming it was his imagination. Then, seconds later, a sharp cracking sound echoed through the valley. The guide turned instantly. Everyone moved back, away from the cliff wall. Confusion spread through the group as small rocks began to fall from above. People hurried away from the unstable side, but the cracking grew louder. A section of the cliff gave way, sending a burst of dust and stones downward. Most of the group managed to pull back. But a sharp cry suddenly cut through the noise. Someone was trapped. Armand didn't think twice. He rushed toward the sound, weaving through falling debris, ignoring the dust that stung his eyes. The guide yelled for him to stop, but Armand kept going. He could hear the cry again, panicked, muffled, desperate as he reached the center of the collapse area. He finally saw her. A young woman had fallen sideways between two large rocks. Her leg was pinned, and the dust around her made it hard to breathe. She tried to push against the stones, but they wouldn't budge. When she saw Armand running toward her, she froze for a second. As if unsure whether he was real or another wave of falling debris. "Don't worry, I'm here," Armand called out. Coughing through the dust, her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. Trying her best to stay calm, Armand dropped to his knees and examined the stones. The rocks were heavy and awkwardly shaped. If he pulled them wrong, they could shift and trap her further. He knew he had to move carefully. More vibrations shook the ground, making the situation even more urgent. "Can you breathe?" he asked. "Yes. Just a little hard," she said, her voice strained. "Okay, I'll get you out." "Hold on!" Armand braced himself, grabbed the larger rock, and used all his strength to lift and shift it. His arms burned and dust filled his throat, but he kept pushing. Slowly, the rock tilted enough for him to drag it aside. He leaned over to help free her leg from the smaller stone. She winced but didn't panic. The moment her leg was free, she tried to stand, but stumbled. Without thinking, Armand caught her and helped her lean against him. "We have to move now," he said. "More rocks might fall." She nodded again, gripping his arm tightly. Her steps were uneven, but she forced herself forward as Armand guided her through the dusty path. The group waited anxiously at a safer spot, calling out for them. The guide looked relieved and shocked when he saw Armand emerging from the dust with the young woman beside him. "Quick, over here," the guide shouted. When she stepped into the clear, everyone gasped. Some bowed their heads in respect. That confused Armand for a moment. He looked at her again. Her clothes were simple, but elegant, her posture graceful, even while injured. And then someone whispered what Armand had failed to realize during all the chaos. She's the princess. Princess Lyra of the Mountain Kingdom. The daughter of the ruling king, known across the land for her kindness and bravery. No wonder everyone reacted with such alarm. Armand suddenly felt a strange weight settle over him. He had not been thinking about titles or status. He just heard someone calling for help. Now, the reality of whom he had saved began to sink in. But Princess Lyra looked at him with calm, grateful eyes. She didn't appear frightened or angry. Instead, she gave a small, sincere smile. "You saved my life," she said softly. "Thank you." Armand felt awkward, almost embarrassed. "Anyone would have done it," he replied. "Not everyone would run toward falling rocks," she said, her voice gentle but firm. The rescue team arrived soon after, guiding everyone back up the valley. Princess Lyra was given medical attention, and though her injury was not severe, everyone treated her with extreme care. Armand stayed on the side, trying to avoid too much attention. He didn't want praise. He certainly didn't want to be the center of a royal-level incident, but things didn't go as he expected. Officials approached him, asking for his name, his background, and every detail about the rescue. They asked him to stay at a nearby guest facility for further statements. Armand tried to explain that he wasn't looking for rewards or recognition, but they insisted. The princess herself had asked to meet him again when she felt better that evening. The story spread everywhere, across the kingdom and beyond. News programs reported the event. People praised the mysterious foreign volunteer who had risked his life. Armand felt overwhelmed. He didn't save the princess for fame. He did it because someone needed help. Late that night, as he lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, he wondered what the palace wanted from him now. What would the king say? Would they consider him irresponsible for entering a dangerous area? Would they blame him? Or would they simply thank him and send him home? He had no idea that this single act of courage would pull him deeper into the kingdom's traditions, expectations, and secrets. He had no idea that the king, a man known for strict rules, would see the rescue in a way Armand never imagined. For now, he only knew one thing. His life was about to change forever. Armand woke up early the next morning, still unsure of what was going to happen next. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the moment the rocks fell, the dust rising, and the princess's frightened face when he reached her. He kept telling himself that everything was fine now, that she was safe, and that he had done the right thing. But the feeling of uncertainty refused to leave him. A palace official arrived soon after sunrise, dressed in a neat uniform, with a calm but serious expression. Armand stood up quickly, feeling nervous even though he hadn't done anything wrong. "The royal family thanks you for your bravery," the official said politely. "His Majesty wishes to meet you today. Please be ready within the hour." Armand nodded stiffly. He tried to smile, but his thoughts were spinning. Meeting the king was no small thing. Back home, he had met government officers, community leaders, and even some famous personalities during his volunteer work. But this felt different. This was a king, someone with power, authority, and a reputation for tradition. Armand wondered if the king was strict or kind. Would he be grateful? Or would he blame Armand for letting the princess be in danger at all? He changed into clean clothes and followed the officials outside. A royal car was waiting for him, shining under the morning sun. As he sat inside, he looked out the window and saw the people of the kingdom going about their daily routine, children walking to school, shopkeepers opening their stores, elders sitting under trees and talking. Everything looked calm, but Armand felt the opposite inside. The palace came into view slowly, rising like a grand piece of history from the middle of the valley. High walls carved with ancient patterns, tall towers touching the sky, and gardens filled with colorful flowers surrounded the main building. For a moment, Armand forgot his anxiety and simply admired the beauty of the place. When the car stopped, several palace guards greeted him respectfully. They guided him through a long hallway, decorated with paintings of past rulers and traditional carvings that told stories of the kingdom's history. Armand walked silently, feeling out of place, but trying his best to stay calm. He was taken to a waiting room with soft chairs, a large window, and quiet music playing somewhere in the background. Before he could sit, the door on the other side opened, and Princess Lyra walked in. She wore simple clothes, not royal attire, and had a light bandage around her ankle. But she walked without help, looking much better than the previous day. When she saw Armand, her eyes brightened. She smiled warmly. "I'm glad you're here," she said, walking toward him slowly. "I wanted to thank you again." "You don't have to," Armand replied, feeling a bit shy. "I'm just happy you're okay." Princess Lyra sat down and motioned for him to sit too. "Yesterday was frightening. I didn't expect a part of the valley to collapse like that. You acted so quickly." "I still can't believe it," Armand shrugged lightly. "I didn't think. I just reacted." "That is what makes it remarkable," she said softly. "Many people freeze in fear. You didn't." Her sincerity made Armand almost forget where he was. She spoke as if she were just a regular girl, not royalty. He appreciated that. Before he could say anything else, the door opened again, and 2 guards bowed deeply. "His Majesty, the King," one announced. Armand stood up instantly, his heart racing. The king entered the room with a quiet authority that made the entire atmosphere shift. He was tall, dressed in traditional royal clothing, and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. His face showed strength, but also a calm that came from years of leadership. Princess Lyra bowed respectfully. "Father." The king's gaze moved from his daughter to Armand. He studied him carefully, not in a hostile way, but in a way that reminded Armand of someone inspecting an important puzzle. "You are Armand," the king said. "Yes." "Your Majesty?" Armand replied, keeping his voice steady. The king stepped closer. "You saved my daughter's life." Armand swallowed and nodded. "I tried my best, sir." The king looked at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to sit in the grand chair near them. "Sit," he said. Armand obeyed, sitting on the edge of his chair, unsure what was coming. The king spoke calmly. "My daughter is precious to this kingdom. Her safety is my responsibility. When I heard a visitor had saved her in the valley, I expected a trained official. But instead I learned it was you, an outsider, a volunteer, someone with no reason to risk his life." Armand didn't know whether to feel honored or nervous. The king leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Armand, why did you run toward danger when others were running away?" Armand hesitated. The question was simple, but the answer felt personal. "Because someone needed help," he said honestly. "I didn't think about danger at that moment. I heard a cry, and I went. I would have done that for anyone." The king's expression softened just a little. Princess Lyra gave a small, proud smile. The king continued. "Bravery without expectation. That is rare in this world." Armand felt a hint of relief. Perhaps the meeting was going well after all. But then something unexpected happened. The king stood up again, walked toward the window, and spoke with a calm voice that carried a heavy meaning. "In our kingdom, we honor ancient traditions. Some laws may seem old, but they have guided us for generations. One of those traditions is this: when a person saves a member of the royal family, their lives become connected in a meaningful way." Armand frowned slightly, unsure what the king meant. Princess Lyra looked down quietly, as if she already knew what her father was about to say. The king turned back to Armand. "I must follow our laws. And according to our tradition, the one who saves the princess becomes bound to her unless the royal family releases them." Armand blinked, surprised. "Bound? I don't understand." The king's voice was firm but calm. "It means that you and Princess Lyra now share a responsibility toward each other. In older times, this bond often led to a union, sometimes symbolic, sometimes official. Our council has already begun discussing this matter." Armand stared at the king, unsure if he had heard correctly. Princess Lyra looked at Armand with gentle concern. "I know this is unexpected. I'm sorry you're hearing it like this." Armand's heart pounded. He had come to the palace expecting maybe a ceremony or a medal, but this was something he had never imagined. The king watched him carefully. "Do not misunderstand. I am not forcing anything blindly. I wish to understand you first. Who you are, what you value, what your intentions are. Armand felt overwhelmed. He never wanted anything from the princess. He had no hidden goal, no plan to impress anyone. He finally spoke, his voice quiet but honest. Your Majesty, I respect your traditions. But I didn't save the princess because I wanted a reward or a bond. I just did what any decent person would do. The king nodded slowly, and perhaps that is why this tradition points toward you. The room fell silent. Armand felt as if his entire world had suddenly become too big and too complicated. He didn't know what to say, what to think, or how to react. Princess Lyra spoke gently. We don't want you to feel pressured. This is only the beginning of discussions. Nothing is final, the king added. But you must understand, Armand. This matter will not simply disappear. You have stepped into the heart of our kingdom's oldest law. Armand sat there quietly, realizing that his life had changed far more deeply than he had expected. He had saved a life, but now the consequences of that moment were stretching into a future he never planned for, and the decision ahead would not be easy. Armand spent the rest of the day walking through the guest wing of the palace, trying to understand everything he had heard. The king's words kept repeating in his mind like an echo that refused to fade. He had come to this kingdom as a tourist and volunteer, someone who simply wanted to learn about a different culture. But now he had been told that an ancient tradition connected him to the princess, in a way he never imagined. He didn't know how to react. Part of him felt honored, but another part felt scared. He didn't want to disrespect the kingdom, but he also didn't want to make a decision he didn't fully understand. Later in the afternoon, an official came to inform him that the royal council wanted to hear his side of the story. Armand felt even more nervous. He had thought his conversation with the king was the hardest part, but now he had to face a group of powerful people who influenced the laws and decisions of the entire kingdom. The council chamber was a large room with tall windows, wooden walls, and a long table at the center. 12 council members sat around it, each wearing traditional clothing that showed their house or role in the kingdom. Their expressions were calm but serious. The moment Armand entered, all eyes turned to him. He felt his chest tighten. One of the senior council members, a man with a gentle but firm voice, began the meeting. Armand, we appreciate your bravery. You saved our princess, and the kingdom is grateful. But as you know, our traditions cannot be ignored. We must discuss the bond that is formed by law. Armand nodded, trying to stay composed. I understand, but I'm not sure what that bond really means. I don't want to disrespect your customs. I just need to understand what is expected of me. The council members exchanged glances. Another member spoke, an elderly woman with wise eyes. The law is older than any of us here. It was created to protect the royal family and to honor those who save their lives. The bond symbolizes mutual respect and unity. In many cases throughout history, this bond led to a union between the saver and the royal. Armand swallowed hard. A union, as in marriage? Some council members nodded. Another replied, not always. Sometimes it means a lifelong promise of support or cooperation. But in the case of the princess, the expectation is much stronger. The people believe that anyone who saves a member of the royal family becomes a part of their destiny. Armand felt the room closing in, the pressure building. He wanted to speak, but before he could, the door opened quietly, and Princess Lyra entered. The council bowed respectfully as she took her place near her father's seat. Even though the king himself wasn't present, she looked at Armand briefly, and he felt a small wave of calm wash over him. Her presence had that effect, steady, reassuring. She addressed the council. I want to speak on Armand's behalf. Please allow me. The council agreed, and she continued. Armand saved my life, but that does not mean he must be forced into something he did not choose. Our laws should protect people, not trap them. I understand our traditions are important, but we also need to understand that times have changed. Her words stirred a quiet murmur in the room. Some members looked concerned, others thoughtful. One council member said, Your Highness, with respect, the tradition is not imprisonment. It is honor. Princess Lyra replied calmly. Honor should never come from pressure. Armand deserves a choice. Armand watched her as she spoke, surprised and touched by her courage. She was royalty, yet she spoke as if she were defending an ordinary person like him. She didn't hide behind tradition or authority. She faced it openly. The council member beside her added, The people of the kingdom expect their future queen to follow tradition. If you reject the bond, many will question the kingdom's values. Princess Lyra nodded with understanding. Yes, they might question it, but it is our responsibility to explain it. Armin and I barely know each other. How can a bond be meaningful if it is not built on truth and time? The room fell silent again. The council members whispered among themselves, unsure how to move forward. Armand stood quietly, grateful for her words but still uncertain of his own place in all of this. After a long discussion, the council ended the session. They told Armand they needed time to review the situation and would give him their decision the next day. Armand bowed politely and left the chamber with the princess. As they walked together in the hallway, she spoke softly. I'm sorry you were dragged into all of this. I didn't want you to feel pressured. Armand shook his head. It's not your fault. You didn't choose the tradition. I just didn't expect something like this. She laughed lightly, not in amusement, but in shared disbelief. Neither did I. My father is strict with traditions because he believes they keep the kingdom united. But even he knows that some traditions must be questioned. Armand looked at her curiously. What do you think about it? About the bond? She slowed her steps, thinking carefully. I think bonds should come from understanding. If two people choose to stand by each other, it should be because they believe in it, not because a law tells them to. Her words settled softly on Armin's mind. He admired that she spoke with honesty. Even though she lived under so much expectation, they reached a garden filled with bright flowers and peaceful fountains. Princess Lyra sat on a stone bench and motioned for him to sit. He joined her, still wondering why fate had connected them in such a strange way. This garden is where I come to think, she said. It helps me breathe when everything feels heavy. Armand looked around. The place was calm, almost magical. Birds chirped from the trees. The gentle sound of water made the atmosphere soothing. You must face a lot of pressure, he said softly. She smiled with a hint of sadness. A royal life looks beautiful from the outside, but inside, it's full of rules. People expect perfection. They expect obedience. Sometimes I feel like I am walking on a thin string. Armand listened carefully, realizing she wasn't just a princess. She was also a human being with worries and hopes like everyone else. Thank you, she suddenly said. For what? Armin asked, surprised. For seeing me as a person, not a title. Armin blinked. Of course, that's how it should be. Princess Lyra looked down for a moment, twisting her fingers gently. If the council decides that the bond must be followed, I will not allow them to force you. I will speak to my father again. I'll make sure you have a choice. Her determination surprised Armand. She barely knew him, yet she was ready to stand against a centuries-old tradition for his sake. Why? He asked quietly. You don't owe me anything. She looked up with soft but steady eyes. Because you didn't think twice before helping me. You didn't hesitate. You acted with your heart. The least I can do is make sure your heart isn't trapped because of it. Armand felt a strange warmth inside, a mix of gratitude, respect, and something he couldn't name yet. They talked for a while longer, sharing small details about their lives. She told him about her childhood, her love for painting, her wish to travel the world someday. Armand told her about his volunteer work, his village, and how he always dreamed of doing something meaningful in life. Even though the situation was complicated, their conversation felt easy and natural, as if fate had made their paths cross for a reason beyond the valley incident. Eventually, a palisade arrived and informed the princess that the king wanted to see her. She stood up, gave Armand a reassuring smile, and walked away. Armand watched her go, feeling the weight of uncertainty return. What would the king say? What would the council decide? Would he be bound to a tradition he barely understood? All he knew was that everything was becoming bigger than him. Bigger than the rescue. Bigger than anything he had expected from this trip. And tomorrow, his life might change again more than he could imagine. Armand did not sleep much that night. Even though the guest room was comfortable, his thoughts kept him awake. The council's uncertain response, the king's serious expression, and the princess's brave words all mixed together in his mind, creating a storm of emotions. He wasn't angry or frightened, just confused. He never wanted to disrespect a culture, but he also never imagined being part of something so big and traditional. As the hours passed, he kept wondering what tomorrow would bring. The next morning, the palace halls felt busier than usual. Servants walked quickly, officials whispered to each other, and guards stood more alert than ever. It was clear that something important was happening. Armand sensed that the council's discussion had stirred deep feelings across the palace. After breakfast, Princess Lyra sent a message asking to meet him in the inner garden. Armand felt a small wave of relief. Her presence always made things feel lighter, even when the situation was difficult. When he reached the garden, she was already there, sitting under a tall tree with sunlight falling gently on her hair. She looked calm but thoughtful, as if she had spent the whole morning preparing for a difficult task. "I'm glad you came," she said with a warm smile. Armand sat beside her. "How did it go with the king? Did you talk to him?" Princess Lyra nodded. "Yes, but it wasn't easy. He is struggling. He wants to respect tradition, but he also understands that forcing you or me into anything won't bring true honor." Armand looked at her carefully. "What did he say exactly?" She sighed. "He said he needs time to think, and he wants to hear from the council again later today. But he also told me something important. He said that he respects your courage, and he wants to make a decision that protects both you and the kingdom." Armand felt a bit better, though uncertainty remained. "I appreciate that. I really do. I just don't want anyone to suffer because of me." Princess Lyra shook her head gently. "You didn't cause this. The tradition did. And traditions can be questioned." Her words were simple, but they carried strength. Armand admired her even more for this courage standing against something that had shaped her entire life. They talked for a while about lighter things, trying to calm their minds. She told him funny stories from her childhood, like the time she hid in the kitchen to steal pastries, and the chef chased her for half the palace. Armand told her about the time he tried to fix a neighbor's bicycle and ended up breaking it even worse. Their laughter filled the garden and made the heavy atmosphere feel soft for a few moments, but the peace didn't last long. A royal guard hurried toward them and bowed. "Your Highness, the council is preparing for another meeting. His Majesty requests your presence immediately. He also invites Armand to join." Armand's stomach tightened. Princess Lyra stood up calmly. "We will be there." As they walked toward the council chamber, Armand noticed the tension in the air. The guards' faces were serious. The palace seemed too quiet, as if everyone was waiting for a storm. Inside the council chamber, the king was already seated. The council members sat around the table, looking divided, some calm, some anxious. Princess Lyra and Armand took their seats. The king began speaking, his voice steady but thoughtful. "We are here today to reach a final decision. Our tradition tells us that the one who saves a royal becomes bound to them. But we must interpret this with wisdom, not fear." One council member disagreed. "Your Majesty, changing or questioning the tradition may upset the citizens. They expect the royal family to honor ancient customs." Another member responded firmly, "But forcing a bond will create even more unrest. The people respect the princess. If she believes choice is important, we should hear her." The debate continued, their voices rising and falling like waves in a storm. Armand sat silently, feeling the weight of every word. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the direction of the kingdom. Finally, Princess Lyra stood up. The room fell silent. She spoke clearly, her voice calm but powerful. "I respect our traditions. I respect our history. But I also believe that traditions must grow with time. A bond that is forced has no meaning. A union made under pressure has no honor. If Armand is to stand beside me, it should be because he chooses to, not because an old law demands it." Her words shook the room. Some council members looked uncomfortable. Others looked moved. The king's expression softened, but worry still lingered in his eyes. Armin felt his heart beat faster. He didn't expect her to speak so boldly. She wasn't just defending him. She was defending freedom, her own and his. The king stood slowly, looking at his daughter. Lyra, you speak with strength, but you must understand the weight of your words. The kingdom will question this choice. They may accuse you of rejecting tradition. Princess Lyra didn't look away. Then let them question. It is time to show them that honor comes from fairness, not fear. Armand felt a quiet admiration growing deeper inside. She was brave in ways he had never seen before. Then the king turned to him. Armand, you have been quiet. I want to hear your thoughts. Do you feel this bond should continue as tradition says? Or do you believe you should be free from it? Armin inhaled deeply. He wasn't used to speaking in front of powerful people, but this moment mattered too much to stay silent. Your Majesty, he began carefully, I respect your traditions more than you know. I respect everything you and your people stand for. But a bond like this, I think it should be something chosen, not demanded. I didn't save the princess to gain anything. I didn't expect a reward or a title. I acted because someone needed help. I hope that counts for something maybe more than a rule written long ago. His words came straight from his heart, and the room felt still for a moment. The king closed his eyes slowly, absorbing everything. Then he finally spoke. You have answered with sincerity. And because of that, he paused. The tension was so strong that everyone seemed to stop breathing. I release both of you from the binding part of the tradition. Armand let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Princess Lyra looked relieved, yet thoughtful. But the king wasn't finished. However, the king continued. While I release you from obligation, I must ask you both one thing. He looked at Armin first, then at his daughter. Are you willing to continue getting to know each other not for the sake of tradition, but for your own hearts? Without pressure, without rules, just a chance to understand what destiny may or may not hold. Princess Lyra looked at Armand, her eyes soft but hopeful. Armand felt something shift inside him. He still didn't know what the future held, but he knew this much. He respected her deeply. He admired her courage, her honesty, her kindness. I would like that, Armand said sincerely. Princess Lyra smiled gently. So would I. The council members whispered among themselves, surprised but not unhappy. The king nodded with approval, a proud expression forming on his face. It is settled, he said. No forced union. No broken tradition. Instead, a new path, one chosen freely. The heavy atmosphere began to lighten. The decision had been made. As Armand and Princess Lyra walked out of the chamber side by side, the palace felt different, warmer, brighter, more open. The fear and confusion that had surrounded them for days were slowly melting away. But even as relief washed over Armand, he knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where freedom, tradition, and destiny would all meet again, and tomorrow everything might change once more. Armand spent the next few days in the palace trying to find answers inside his own heart. He walked through the long halls, the peaceful gardens, and the quiet courtyards, thinking about the strange path his life had taken. Only a short time ago, he had been an ordinary volunteer visiting a distant kingdom. He had not imagined that a single rescue would place him at the center of royal discussions, political pressure, and ancient traditions. But more than anything, he could not stop thinking about Princess Lyra, her gentle voice, her kindness, and the courage she showed when she stood up to her father. Armand knew he had to make a choice soon. The king had finally agreed to let the decision be his, and the entire palace seemed to be waiting. The council members wanted an answer. The guards whispered about it when Armand passed by. The palace workers looked at him with curiosity, wondering if he would become part of the royal family. Yet the one person who never pressured him was Lyra herself. She simply gave him space, respecting his freedom, even though her own future was tied to his decision. On the evening before, he was expected to give his final answer. Armand walked to the royal garden, where he often went to clear his thoughts. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink, and a cool breeze moved through the trees. As he walked, he found Princess Lyra standing beside a fountain, quietly watching the water. She turned when she sensed his presence. "You look tired," she said softly. Armand smiled a little. "Maybe I am thinking too much." "It is a big decision," she replied, her eyes warm, "and it should be made slowly, with honesty. If the choice becomes too heavy, remember this. I don't want you to feel tied to tradition or duty. You saved me because you are a good person, not because you wanted anything in return." Armand nodded. He appreciated her sincerity. In the days they had spoken, he had learned how thoughtful she was. She cared deeply for her people, for her father, and for the future of the kingdom. She had dreams of modernizing old rules, helping people from distant lands, and bringing new ideas into the palace. She wanted to be the kind of leader who encouraged growth, kindness, and unity. Armand admired this about her. They walked slowly through the flowers, neither of them speaking for a while. Finally, Lyra stopped and faced him. "No matter what you decide tomorrow," she said, "I want you to live a life that feels right to you. The kingdom will adjust. My father will adjust. And so will I." Her words made something inside Armand feel lighter. She did not try to win him with emotional pressure. She did not remind him of ancient laws or royal expectations. Instead, she reminded him of his freedom. And ironically, that made Armand realize something: his choice was no longer about pressure. His decision would be based on respect. That night, Armand lay awake in his guest room, staring at the ceiling. He thought about everything that had happened. He thought about the moment he rescued Lyra, the fear in her eyes, and the relief she felt when they reached safety. He remembered how she tried to make him comfortable the day he arrived at the palace, how she gently encouraged her father to treat him with respect, and how she later stood up for him when the council demanded an answer. She had shown him trust. She had shown him courage. She had shown him a heart that wanted peace, not power. Armand finally understood his own feelings. He felt connected to her not because he saved her life, but because she had shown him a side of herself that she rarely showed others. She had shown him who she truly was. The next morning, the palace gathered in the grand hall. The king sat on the central seat of the royal council, looking calm but serious. The council members stood in their traditional robes. Palace guards lined the walls, and many workers watched from a respectful distance. The atmosphere felt heavy with expectation. Princess Lyra sat slightly to the king's side, her face composed and graceful, but her fingers were tightly folded together. She did not look at Armand directly, perhaps trying to avoid influencing him, even with her expression. Armand entered the hall, his steps steady even though his heart was beating fast. He stopped at the center, where all eyes were on him. The king leaned forward. "Armand," the king said in a strong voice, "you have been given days to think about your decision. Today, we ask you to speak your answer. Do you choose to enter a union with my daughter, Princess Lyra, or do you choose to walk your own path?" The hall fell silent. Armand looked at the king, then at the council, and finally at Princess Lyra. She lifted her gaze slowly and met his eyes with a calm, patient expression. Armand took a deep breath. "I choose the union." A soft murmur of surprise ran through the hall. Even the king's eyes widened slightly, as if he had expected a different answer after giving Armand complete freedom. Princess Lyra's lips parted in a quiet breath, her eyes glowing with emotion she tried to hide. Armand continued speaking so everyone could hear him clearly. "I choose it not because of tradition, not because of law, and not because of pressure. I choose it because I have seen Princess Lyra's heart. She is brave, gentle, and honest. She wants a future built on respect and kindness, and I admire her more than words can say. If I am to walk forward in life, I would like to walk beside someone like her." Princess Lyra's eyes softened, and she looked down for a moment, touched by the sincerity of his words. The king slowly stood up, a proud and relieved smile appearing on his face. "Then your choice is honored," he said. "From this day forward, the union shall be recognized, not by ancient law, but by free will." The council members bowed their heads respectfully, accepting Armin's decision with newfound admiration. They had expected a reluctant answer, but instead they had heard a heartfelt one. Princess Lyra stepped forward, approaching Armand with a graceful smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not for choosing the union, but for choosing freely." Armand felt warmth spread through his chest. "The choice was mine," he answered softly, "but you made it easy." In the days that followed, the kingdom celebrated the union not as a tradition, but as a symbol of change. The king updated the ancient law, declaring that no life-saving act would ever force a bond again. Instead, every union would be formed with consent from both sides. The people praised the decision, calling it a step toward a brighter future. Armin and Princess Lyra spent more time together, learning about each other's dreams and plans. They walked through the gardens, visited villages, and spoke with ordinary citizens. Armin admired how Lyra treated everyone with fairness and warmth. Lyra admired Armand's humility and thoughtful nature. Slowly, their connection grew into something real, something built not on duty, but on understanding. Their story became known throughout the kingdom as a tale of courage, change, and the strength of free choice. It was a reminder that sometimes unexpected paths bring people together in the most meaningful ways. And as Armand and Lyra stood side by side, looking toward their shared future, they both knew this truth. Their journey began with an accident, but their bond was formed by the heart.